Hello everybody and welcome or welcome back to the second shelf and to another video. We are back to Sunday recent reads. Yes. That was a bit of a glitch last week. For those of you who watch all my videos, like you all do, right? But we're back Sunday, recent reads, a video in which I look back at my reading and tell you, books I finished, and you know the drill. And I have 3 books that I finished that I want to talk to you about. And the first one I actually finished some time ago, but then for some reason it slipped through the cracks and I didn't talk about it, which in the end turned out well because there's another book, the second one, with a similar theme. And now I've lost you, I'm sure. What the bloody hell are you talking about? Okay, the first book is Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang, published earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken. As always, I can't remember publication dates. That's why I write it all down. Yes, earlier this year. And it was quite a hyped book. Also because Rebecca Kuang wrote the Poppy War series and Babel. So she was already a well-known fantasy author. This is, however, not fantasy, but it's contemporary literary fiction. The premise of the book is you have 2 writers, one white, one Asian. The Asian writer, I think her name is Athena, is very successful right out of college writers program. She has a successful debut and TV series and whatnot, and her, well, kind of, maybe we will get into that through the novel, friend June is a white writer. Just they met in college and she's not successful at all. And this is not a spoiler because it's on the blurb. It's the premise of the book. I think like maybe 20, 25 pages in, Athena dies in a freak accident. And June was present. And just before the accident happened, Athena tells June about her new project that she hadn't talked about to anybody. That's, I think, is the correct grammar. And she showed her the manuscript. And then, of course, plot ensues when June decides to, take the manuscript and revise it and present it as her own. But that is not so much the point of the book. The point of the book is that, hence Yellowface, is that June then is promoted by a pen named June Song, which gives the implication that she has Asian heritage. She doesn't look it, but Asian heritage at least, to give the book, the novel, more quote unquote authenticity, and then plot ensues from there. And I'm not going to go into what happens, but that is the basic thing about the Yellowface, that you pass not only a work by an Asian author as your own, as a white person, but that you then implicitly imply that you are also Asian. And I thought the premise was really interesting. I hadn't read that much about Yellowface. I mean, blackface we're all familiar with, but Yellowface I haven't read that much as a white European person. I mean, not that I didn't read it because I'm white and European, but I didn't come across it. That's, you know what I mean. Anyway, so that I thought was really something that I wanted to explore. And here it would make sense to say as a white European person. And the how publishing in particular deals with, own voices, authenticity, that kind of thing. It is hilariously funny at times. It was not a fantastic book for me, though, and that is because I didn't think the story, the plot, was that well done, and that was also my grief or issue with Kwang's novel Babel that I read. The premise was fantastic, and I struggle with fantasy, but the premise was really, really good. But I thought the plot was a bit like, nah, and it was the same here. But still, I think it's worth reading because of the topic, because of the premise. And the other book that I just bought like 2 weeks ago and read immediately is exploring the same theme, but then in academia. So not in publishing, but in academia. And it's Elaine Chow's book, a debut novel, Disorientation, which was published a couple of years back, a couple of years back. Last year, 2022, but 2023 is almost gone, so it feels like 2022 is like 2 years back. Never mind. So Chow explores a very, very similar theme, like I said, in academia. Her main character is a Taiwanese American scholar, PhD student, Ingrid Yang. And Yang, I think, Yang. And she writes a thesis on a fictional, very famous Chinese poet, contemporary poet, who just died. He lived partly in the US, so he was well known and translated, and not translated, he wrote in English. So that's her thesis. And then she comes across something that puts everything we know about this poet in question. And I'm not going to say too much because that's too spoilery. But again, the point is authenticity, own voices. And Elaine Chow mainly explores the idea that how much people of color, and she focuses on Asian people, Asian American people, are forced by academia to go into a certain direction. Like, she didn't even want to look at this poet, but for her department, it made sense because the department head is white, and so they need Asian scholars to write PhD, stuff like that. And again, the premise was really interesting, and the plot was like Yellowface, almost kind of a crime novel plot, the suspense about finding out what really happened to this Chinese poet. And then in the last third, it kind of withered away a little bit. But I'm more forgiving here because it's a debut novel. I still feel that the last part was just not as strong in terms of plot development, how it ended. But again, the topic really grabbed me and interested me. So I'm glad I read it, and I'm also glad that I read Yellowface. And if you have any suggestions about novels, preferably not too long ago, let's say the last 10 years maybe, or 15 years, exploring the theme of yellowface or racism towards the Asian community in the US or in Europe, please leave a comment with a suggestion. The third book I talked about already in my recent reads, and I finished Salt Houses by Hala Alian. This book was published in 2017, and she is, I don't think I know when she was born. No, it doesn't say. But she is a Palestinian American poet, But this is her first novel, so I count this as a debut. And I made a whole video about books from Palestinian authors or about Palestine with the hashtag Read Palestine, and this is one of the books that I talked about then in that video, and the first book that I finished. So this follows a family, the Yaqub family. We have a, can you see that? Yeah, I made some notes about birthdays so that I can keep track. But the Yaqub family over 3 generations. We start with Salma and move on to her daughters and son, and then to one of the daughter's children. So it's 3 generations of Palestinians, and the book opens in 1963, the wedding day of Salma's youngest daughter. And then we learn about the family history, that Salma's parents and Salma herself, with her husband, they had to flee from Jaffa in 1948 during the war. They settled in Nablus, but Salma couldn't really settle there, or more her husband couldn't really. And then there is a continuous story of refugeedom. So from Jaffa to Nablus, then from Nablus to Amman, to Kuwait, to Beirut, to the US, all not immigration in the sense that I immigrated from Germany to Holland, but that's not the point. The point is that they had to go as refugees. So it's a non-voluntary, most of it is a non-voluntary move. It's not entirely true, because partly one of the children then moves to Paris to study, another one moves to the US, and that is voluntarily done. But the move from Jaffa to Nablus to Kuwait to Beirut to Amman, that's not voluntarily done. I really, really enjoyed this book. I mean, enjoyed. It's not an uplifting story, even though there is much hope and family relations and how they bond together. But it's a heartbreaking story of people who are not able to find a home because they are expelled or forced to go by external circumstances, war mainly. So I thought that was really well done, the various generations. We have time jumps in between. So it's not continuous from 1963 until it ends, I think, in 2004, 2007. But we have time jumps, sometimes 10 years, sometimes 5 years, and we get various perspectives, which is, I think, works really well with this book, because each generation also has a different past and hence a different outlook on that whole refugee status thing. It's very much focusing on the experience of women, which I also appreciated. And the last thing that I thought made it interesting for me also is that the family is not poor at all. And still they suffer. And of course, if you are poor and a refugee, it's so much worse. But I liked the fact that in our Western society, we sometimes or often tend to think that money can solve all our problems. And of course, if you don't have enough to eat, if you don't have enough money to buy food or shelter, money can solve those problems. But it doesn't solve other issues, like the fact that you are not welcome anymore in Jaffa, that you have to flee, or that in Nablus you have to go. And I liked it that she didn't make it about money, like we would then, just throw some money at them and then they'll be fine. No, they're not. So I can highly recommend this if you're interested in the view of Palestinian experience between 1948 and 2004, shown as a family. And no, there is no info dump with the history or the wars. They are, of course, not ignored, but they are shown through the eyes and lives of this family. So I thought it was a really, really good book. And as a debut, I think it's amazing. And I will certainly read her next one. The title of which I now forgot, but never mind. And then briefly, the books that I'm currently reading. And the first one is a buddy read with Heidi, Elizabeth George, In the Presence of the Enemy, published in 1996. We slowly make our way through the Inspector Linley mysteries. This is number 8. And I think we are now at number 20-something. So I don't know whether we will ever be able to catch up, but we read about maybe 3 or so a year. So yeah, there is a chance. And this one is quite political. It's about the probable kidnapping of the child of a very conservative politician. She is undersecretary something or other. When her daughter, 10 years old, is gone missing, and there is the question, who is the father? It's also very political, talking about peace talks with the IRA, and it opens in a surprising way, because the first third of the book is not even about Inspector Linley and Havers, but it focuses on the side kicks that we know, Linley's soon-to-be wife, Lady Helen, and their best friends, Simon St. James, who is a pathologist, a forensic pathologist, and his wife, Deborah, who is a photographer. So the 3 of them start an investigation, and then in a later stage, Linley and Havers are brought in. And as always, I feel I'm just in very capable hands, and, just roll with it. So we have another check-in today, so that's why I'm a bit cagey about what happened so far. And then the 2 books that I'm still working on, didn't make much progress, are those 2, The Emperor of Rome by Mary Beard, about what it means to be an emperor in Rome, and this by Amy Yagi, Diary of a Void, translated by, David Boyd and Lucy North, about a woman in Japan, contemporary Japan, who pretends to be pregnant. And I barely read 15 pages, so I can't really tell you much about that. Anyway, these were my recent reads on Sunday. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. And like I always say, and I always really, really mean it, I'm looking forward to your comments, and I'll talk to you all soon in the next one.